Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the inaugural session of the Inspiring Leaders Project. Just thinking about this project, it's meant to get insights from leaders across industries to understand what framed their leadership journey, what inspired them, and what advice would they have for the next generation when they think about leadership. So, my first question, how would you define leadership from your perspective?
I think a leader is someone who is serving people, who is helping people achieve their goals, who is willing to spend time to develop people and to listen and work with people. That's what leadership is all about. That's the quality of a leader. Individual who is willing to serve, not to be served. That's a leader.
Thank you so much. And I think that's a very important point to make, especially in this time and age where we've seen different types of leadership in the public space that may not really align with what you just described. So it's interesting. What I'd like to touch on as we have this conversation is how do you ensure that you are able to still keep your values or your principles as a leader in an environment that does not necessarily applaud that type of leadership approach? So maybe I'll hand it over to Dotun to just share his perspective on what leadership is.
I believe Dr. Maxwell defined it as influence. I think, in summary, in my experience, leadership is a couple of things. You have to be able to influence people for better towards a goal, but there's the people part of it. At the end of having implemented a system, there should be better people, there should be better outcomes. Somewhere in the middle of that is building a set of systems and infrastructure to achieve that and to perpetuate that. So, in the end, leadership is influence on the one hand, but undergirding that influence is better people and effective structures.
Thank you so much. Dr. Judd talked about wanting to serve and not being served, and you talked about influence for a greater outcome. Femi, what's your perspective on leadership?
I'm going to try to take bits from what Dr. Jordan Dotson said. I feel um, the leader's core responsibility is figuring out how to make the components work as a whole for the purpose of achieving a goal. And I feel a lot of that has to do with, or at least the way I approach it, has to do with selling the dream or selling the project or the goal to the people that are participating in it with you to make them own the project. So it does, it's a lot of convincing that the project even makes sense to start with. That way, people are engaged. And I think that speaks to what Dr. George says too, because you're building somebody, so they should see value in the process. And I think that's a leader's sort of core responsibility to figure out how to compile all of the revolving parts and marshal it for achieving a goal.
That's very great, being a people leader and having influence and also making them own the outcome. And that is being able to translate a vision to the people that they see value in so they own it and you don't necessarily have to put a carrot and stick for them. So would you mind sharing influences or maybe role models or people that have influenced your leadership approach in your journey?
That's a good question. I'll start, of course, with my executive director of my graduate program, Uwe Brandes. That's the way he approaches projects. He will always say that the urban planner's core responsibility is to sell the projects to the stakeholders, which most times are your elected officials, your governors, your senators, whoever it is. It's not enough for you to be invested in the project and to say that, oh, this is the most beautiful high speed rail that has ever existed. You also have to have the skill of being able to speak to folks that might not understand the jargon of how many centimeters of this or how much kilowatts. Speak in a way that they understand, so you don't exclude them from the conversation, because they're the ones that are going to help you get your project approved and whatnot. So just taking that perspective and knowing that you have to read the room more or less. You have to know how to engage with people while keeping the core focus of your project at heart.
Yeah, so what I'll distill from what you're saying is that the influence you've gotten from your professor just highlights the fact that a leader needs to be able to communicate effectively across different stakeholder groups and be able to influence them to accomplish the outcome they're looking to attain. Dr. George, would you mind sharing your early influences? Who inspired you, or what leadership attributes and maybe certain role models inspired you to take the leadership approach that you previously described to us?
I would probably bring up 1,000 role models in my career of being a physician. But the natural selection is right there. Like you're able to approach this individual, is able to solve your problem. Automatically, that person becomes a leader to you. So I'm just saying that you, as an individual, you will decide who your role model will be. The person that actually is able to shape your future. When I became a director, people will call me in the middle of the night, ask questions. If I don't pick up my phone twice or three times, probably they're not going to call me again and call somebody else. It has to really come in a natural way for you to actually influence people and shape people.
I like what you mentioned, right? Because from your experience and the number of people you've interacted with in your career, you've engaged with individuals or leaders that probably have shown up a certain way, and you've been able to mimic, emulate those characteristics because they were very responsive, they were always available to help, to answer questions, to guide. And that translates into some of the attributes that you've embodied in how you show up too.
Yeah.
So that's pretty powerful. So for Dotun, would you mind sharing core values that guide your leadership decisions, or what are the core values that you put into consideration in showing up each day as a leader in your space?
That's a good question. I'm going to start with a simple but often abused word: integrity, right? Which has to stem from the earth, right? There's a sense of what's true, what's pure, what's honest, what's transforming people, and forever iterating towards that, even if circumstances change. Another is flexibility. And the analogy I would use is a compass. The knot remains the knot, but you will pass through a bunch of things to get through that, even though there is some flexibility in holding the purpose constant and the methods flexible. And somewhere in the middle of that is also systems, which is while you are true to your purpose, while you are flexible in your method, I think there's also a bit of clarity as regards what you try to achieve. You can call it purpose, you can call it vision, but there should be some sense of clarity in what you are trying to achieve, because that enables you, one, to know what you are forever solving for, to know when you are cutting the methods and you're cutting through to the bone of the purpose itself. So integrity, flexibility, and clarity of vision. At least those three.
Okay.
Important.
No, that's great. And I'll pick on the first one you touched on, which is integrity. How do you create as a leader? One, I think this would be a two-pronged question, and anybody can answer. First question is, how do you create an environment that will allow people to, just based on integrity, when they make mistakes, feel comfortable to step up and own up and say, I made this mistake? And second part of the question is tying integrity to creating an environment where people feel comfortable to make mistakes, to fail, because they know that they have an environment that supports them. And you as a leader, have you experienced a situation where in the course of your journey you made a mistake?
Well, I'll say one thing I always say across projects I'm involved in with other people, I belong to the school of it's okay to not know. Sometimes you might not know how to go ahead with something, or you might not know the right process. I'll ask questions. I mean, If you don't ask questions tomorrow, the sun will go up in the sky tomorrow, and you still not know that. So I'll ask if it's embarrassing. That's fine. I'll be embarrassed for 2 hours, and after that, I'll have that knowledge. So I try to create that environment of, look, if you don't know something, it's okay to ask, and I think that just also passes across the ability for folks to feel it's okay to engage, have conversations. Well, you might be the leader, but you're there to serve as well.
Do you have anything to add, Dotson?
If you want to create an atmosphere where people feel they can make mistakes, if nobody is dead and it's not destroying the purpose, give it a minute, right, before you pass judgment. One thing I've also found useful in terms of creating an atmosphere is being able to share your mistakes with your team, especially in the context of what you are trying to achieve. That was a bad call. This is what we've learned from it. I think it creates an atmosphere for people to be able to feel comfortable enough to take risks. I think innovation is at the edge of that risk taking. So you will not innovate, you will not break new ground if one, you don't make mistakes, or if you don't take the risk of making mistakes. It's either I've taken that risk and it has proven successful, or I didn't blow anything up, which kind of goes to the point that you also, either from a leadership or from the teams you are encouraging, you have to be able to lead with conviction on the one hand, or also be able to support people in their leadership with conviction. I like what Jeff Bezos said about, in some cases you have to disagree but commit. I mean, the potential is significant enough that you can assume the risk, even if not the full risk, but to assume the risk to take the next step.
I just add, in terms of mistakes taken, I feel your reputation also speaks for you. If you're someone that's been diligent at your job, and people will know that, all right, you probably didn't mean to do that, or you didn't mean for that scenario to happen that way. I'll give you an example. When I was with the city, I had a public hearing that I was preparing for. And the way they do it, you have dockets, you have cases, and I think I was number 5. So I had like 4 cases before me. So I was getting ready in the office. The office is next to the council chambers, and something happened that 2 of those cases got moved. So mine came up to be the next case, and I wasn't there because I thought I had so much time, and someone had to come and tell me that, hey, your case is on. So I had to run into the just council chamber, wear my tie and all of that. And my supervisor then already had to start presenting my case. I sat behind him, then took over after all. In that scenario, he knew exactly what happened. If I didn't have the character, or had missed cases before in the past, then that would have been a problem.
Yeah, and I like that example you shared, right? And I think I'll just share maybe a quick story too. I had a situation where working with a prior employer, I had this amazing boss that was very supportive, and I got an opportunity to save the company money by upgrading a system that we used for our day-to-day operations. I did that upgrade 2 years in a row. Previously, they hired people to come in to get that done, but I was like, I can do this. So I got it done 2 years in a row. The third year, the vendor made changes to the process, and I ignored that change and went ahead with what I had always done. And of course, it backfired because they upgraded certain things I should have factored in. So that caused the system not to operate effectively. Eventually, I had to tell my boss. And what she said was like, don't worry about it. We'll get the vendor in to help us fix this. But I had to be upfront and open. And one thing she said that I say now is that we're not saving lives here. So this now goes to my next question for Dr. George. In my field, in our fields, we're not saving lives. We can afford to make mistakes. And to Femi's point, your credibility over time can gain you some leeway because you could have been tested and proven that you're consistent in delivering. But in your field, I don't know that you have that liberty. So I'd like to hear from you. How do you handle errors and mistakes in that field and still create that environment of empathy and support?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Dalton was talking about integrity because in the medical field, that's standard. Your integrity, you have to be truthful, you have to be honest. If you make any mistake, In terms of dosing mistakes and things like that, of course, you call your patient, you explain, you call the pharmacy, you stop certain things. We have training to reduce medical error because those are one of the leading causes of death in patient care management. But as a leader, I show support because there will be mistakes. You have to open up, you talk to your compliance. It can ruin somebody's life if you try to keep it because it will still come to the open. There's no way you can hide those mistakes. That's why integrity is really important. You have to really make sure that you always speak the truth. And then the leaders, whoever you're reporting to, your supervisor, you have to open up and tell them. You just have to tell people on time, and then everybody will rally around and support you. But I'm not saying that the system is all perfect. Errors will happen, mistakes will happen. But when people know that you're very honest, you're diligent, you're hardworking, and you do the right thing, people will protect you when things happen. That's why they're leaders, right?
I think one thing I'll take away from what you said is that bad news does not age well. You speak up and create an environment where you rally around to solve that problem.
Yeah.
The next question is, how do you lead in times of uncertainty or rapid change and ensure clarity in decision making?
That's another good question. I think you start with what the purpose you are trying to achieve, right? It's your environment that's changing. I think it's to reinforce the vision, that clarity of vision, what we're trying to do here. I think also, depending on the scale of the organization, you need to be able to allow some autonomy. You have to give away power to people who are close to. So be clear about the mission, simplify some clear metrics that you reinforce from a leadership perspective across the organization, pass power down, right? There's too much moving around that you want everything to cascade up. Pass power down as much as possible. Now, it needs to be with trained people, it needs to be with people that have the right support. That I'm taking that as a given, and that's not a simple thing. Back to the conversation we had about structure, but clarity of vision, autonomy down to the lowest level in a, what do you call it, VUCA situation. What's that? I've forgotten. Volatile, uncertainty. You need the people who are closest to it to make those decisions while adhering to the sanctity of the vision.
To set the vision, delegate, and make sure that everybody's matching to a common goal and be able to make decisions fast based on folks that are experts and have ownership in their respective space.
That's right.
Femi, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say a great philosopher once said, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. I mean, if you're a leader, there's a reason why you're there anyway. I feel it's incumbent upon anyone that's in those kind of positions to always look to better themselves. We talked about mentors of how the people that have inspired me. Once someone solves your problem, they automatically become your leader. There's a reason why people are in those positions. Most times, in my experience, they are usually the best of the best at what they do. Like they're very precise. They have a long history of being champions of the projects that they are engaged in. And I think it's incumbent upon leaders to be in that position and to keep growing. So when you find yourself in those kind of situations, it'll be like muscle memory that just kicks in like, all right, this is exactly what we should do. This is how we should navigate this scenario. I've had some of that happen to me personally. I find myself in situations that you'll be shocked that you already know exactly how to approach a problem, but it's obviously because you are prepared for it.
Yeah, that's great. So one thing I'll add, at least from my perspective, is that in terms of uncertainty, rapid change, making decisions, I think it's important that you have transparency across the organization because transparency breeds trust. And when you have trust, people are really ready to go above and beyond in spite of the uncertainty because they know that they're hearing clearly from the leader, they know what's going on, have visibility into the current state and maybe the vision. And also delegating, but delegating in the sense that you're able to take input fast and make decisions as input and data comes in to influence a change in direction. As new information comes in, you're able to adapt to that information, the path to address whatever you're trying to deal with. So now going to the last segment of our session today. It's really been amazing hearing such great insights and just encouraging words from each of our panelists this evening. So going into the last segment, what do you hope your legacy would be as a leader, Femi?
This is a very simple, straightforward question. Projects that have led to significant impact. Um, I mean, in my line of work, of course, there are tangible things you can see, like infrastructure projects that you were part of. But yeah, having more of those, especially projects that directly improve people's lives, improve people's quality of life. Those are projects that I hope to be associated with.
So how do you want people to feel after working with you?
Empowered, enlightened, ready for the next challenge, because that's how I've felt working with every person that has been ahead of me. And I'll say this might be a little controversial. At any point in time that I was in a situation where I wasn't growing, I wasn't getting anything from that relationship, I would change it, I would leave. So at every level that I am, or any project that I'm leading, or when I'm working with folks, I take it as a point of duty to make sure that they are learning something, they are gaining new skills, they are I'm pushing them to figure out new ways to approach projects, to think outside the box. So when they leave that project, in most cases, you want people to keep being on the same team. But regardless, when you're done with that project, you'll have unlocked another level of career growth or just specialization.
Yeah, and I think what you just said resonates very deeply because it ties to what Simon Sinek said in one of his videos, where he said when people join his organization, he sits with them and says, "Look, we're going to invest in you." And I'm paraphrasing here. And whether you stay here or leave, whether you like it here or not, you're going to leave a better person, right? So that's deep.
Yeah.
So, final question for you: what advice would you give to the next generation of leaders?
How did Steve Jobs say it? He said, "Stay hungry, stay foolish," or something. Like, I mean, personally, I do things that I am very much interested in. Uh, doesn't mean that I don't have a work ethic or I don't apply myself, but that at least helps me to put in more time than I would normally do because of the interest. That's the first thing. But also it gives me the space to be able to approach things with new thinking. Like I'm not trying to do the same thing that people have been doing for the last 10 years. Like what else am I adding to my field? What else am I contributing to my organization? And how, of course, how is it going full circle to also contribute to my life? So I would say stay inquisitive, stay look for ways to push the envelope. Don't just join the crowd and tick the box. Create a new chapter.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. So, Dutton, what do you hope your leadership legacy will be?
I'd like it to be in structures and people. People in the sense of improved quality of life that are able to reproduce. I want to leave a legacy where people live a better quality of life, but they have come into a structure and a system and tools that enables them to perpetuate that.
That's right, a system that keeps giving and giving and reinventing and regenerating. That's amazing. How do you want people to feel after working with you?
I totally resonate with what Femi said about inspired. I want to go a bit beyond inspired. I want empowered in a credible sense of it, right? I have people coming back to me periodically saying I was encouraged years after. I want to go a bit beyond that, right? Back to this structure and systems. I want to be able to say at some point and look at the presidents of 5 countries and say they are changing the world because I had some impact, because I had that tangible level of impact, right? I want to see people changing the world.
Lives, period. You want to change the world through the lives of people. So, what advice would you give to the next generation of leaders?
Again, Femi stole my turn. I was this close to say, stay hungry.
So it was a heavy lift for you to ask me all the questions, but maybe not. Maybe
I thought
at
so
first.
too, but hey. What advice would you give the next generation of leaders?
Do the work. Leadership is hard work. All right. We all love the moments when the lights are on or when the results go the way we want that. We can either bask in the adulation or point to the results and say, look at what or look at what we did. But there are darker moments of the soul where you have to build this thing or build people or build a system and structure that the only person that will believe is yourself. The work will be required. Do the work. When the moment requires it and it's not in the light, but it is the right thing, do the work.
Thank you. I've seen that there are lots of people out there that can talk a good talk. They are smooth, they are eloquent. But when it comes to execution and doing the work, night and day, they're not able to execute. So I really like that advice that, yes, talk a good game, but be able to roll up your sleeves and do the work, execute and execute excellently and flawlessly. So, Dr. George, what do you hope your leadership legacy would be?
So my leadership legacy, it will be that of I was able to work with people, improve people's life professionally, allow them to have this sense of belonging and confidence and able to achieve better than they thought. You know, a lot of people have a lot of potential. I want to be remembered as someone who kind of showed that love and showed people the ability to be able to tap fully into their potential and be able to develop fully into what they're supposed to be in life.
Thank you. So, final question for you. What advice would you give the next generation of leaders?
So my advice is start today. Be an aspiring leader. Start working hard. Work well with people. Just show respect and be humble. You know, ask questions. Pick a role model in your field.
Thank you so much. So, we've had such an amazing session today filled with lots of insights. We started off talking about leadership. Leadership is about serving others and not necessarily wanting to be served. Leadership is about influence, about setting a vision and making sure that people are able to work towards it. And leadership is a journey. And you start by leading yourself, showing up each day and growing in that journey, looking for role models, mentors to help inform and guide your leadership principles. You know, the saying goes that everything lies and falls on leadership. So, my question to you is, what kind of leader are you going to be? Thank you for joining us today and can't wait for the next session.